Just when we thought we were getting over the hump, that we've leveled the curve, here we are, almost 100 days into COVID at the time of this taping, and I am sitting at one of the epicenters here in Arizona. There are spiked rates all over the country, especially in red states where they have opened up the economy. And we just witnessed Donald Trump host a rally or attempt to host a rally in Tulsa in which barely anybody was wearing a mask and they were being shoved in like sardines at the entrance point. And this is where our country is. This was a day after the celebration of Juneteenth, which emancipated those enslaved in the United States after the Civil War. It was not a dog whistle. It was a ginormous FU to everybody who's out there organizing, to the generations of organizers, to the legacy of slavery in this country, the horrible history that our country has yet to reckon with. And Donald Trump, instead of being sensitive, being understanding, being presidential, or even silent, honestly, he listened to his advisors who are aligned with the Nazi movement. So that's what's on the line right now. Meanwhile, Joe Biden has been putting together his presidential picks, his vice presidential picks. He is putting together his transition team, as was just announced today, transition team meaning into the presidency. So we have a leadership deficit in this country. And I really, looking back at history, of course, I was not alive, and few of us were old enough to remember or see what was happening in the 60s during the civil rights movement. But so many of our leaders were killed, were targeted. So many politicians, whether it was locally or nationally, and of course, movement leaders like Malcolm X and MLK Jr., the leaders were being attacked then. And now we have silence among our leaders who are supposed to be on our side. I think this is a dangerous moment. We're going into a general election, and while the streets are flooded with organizers, and while we have Zoomers out there staging online protests in such creative and powerful ways, and we're so grateful to that, we're those who have the power of the pen, who have the power of the purse strings, who have the power to actually change legislation, if they're so inclined to even organize or try, are remaining silent. They're staging photo ops. This is getting really old. This is getting very old. And if Donald Trump does not win, and I sure hope he doesn't, because let's remember here, nothing is going to change with Joe Biden, but everything is going to continue to change with Donald Trump. If Joe Biden were to win, this is just the beginning. We as a movement have to keep this pressure. We have to keep electing people to Congress. I mean, what a year to run for office. In the midst of COVID, people can't knock on doors in grassroots movements. They're getting donations flooding in at the end, maybe a coalition to support them. But just remember that those are only a few races. There are dozens of people, progressives, running at the local level across this country right now who are in need of support. You have Paula Jean Swearengin, who just won the primary for U.S. Senate. U.S. Senate. She has defied all odds. She is doing this in a very lonely and independent way. And I say that because people are still scared to take on the Democratic establishment in West Virginia, even though West Virginia is a state that is full of working class folks, a state that believes in progressive economics, a state that has a legacy of union organizing, even more recently, uprisings. And yet our current leaders in office or organizations are afraid. We're living in an era of fear. And that is why it's so encouraging to see Zoomers step up. And that is why it's so encouraging to see people who are frustrated with their community, who don't play politics, who don't play transactional politics, show up and say, I'm running for office. And we have to remember that there are a lot of folks who aren't getting attention right now that are working extremely hard. At the time of this taping, we have a primary coming up in New York on June 23rd, in which there are a lot of upstarts across New York City, upstate, on Long Island, who are running against the establishment. And many of them are not getting the national attention or the coalition support, but they're still doing it. They've been running for over a year. And I hope no matter what happens, because they've had a campaign during COVID against the New York establishment, that they continue to run, because it's all about planting these seeds. It's all about understanding that solidarity in this movement is solidarity. Means if we can support folks early or along the way and bring in people, not just going to the person who's getting all the attention or all the money or all the endorsements, but remembering that this type of institutional structural change that needs to happen with our army. It's not enough just to get one or two people elected. At this moment, when our leaders are silent, who lack courage, who can't even endorse ideas like Medicare for all or the Green New Deal or defund the police, at this moment, that means that we have to flip things very quickly. Because if climate change isn't a dire threat, everything else is pushing more on the working class, especially after COVID. Thank you for watching and listening to the Nomiki Show. Make sure to click like and subscribe on YouTube and share with everybody on social media. And of course, if you're not a patron already, please join us on patreon.com/The Nomiki Show for as low as $5 a month. That money makes a huge difference. We don't have the corporate money coming in. We're not cable news that's raking in the dough from advertisers right now as everybody's sitting at home and watching. It is really you guys who are keeping us together. So please consider being a patron. And for those of you who have already, we are incredibly grateful to you.